Greetings once again from beautiful Thunk Studios in the heart of the Supercharger Dead Zone in Fargo, North Dakota. My name is Jeff. This is the Tesla News and Topics podcast special edition for January 11th, 2019.
I think we've got quite a lot of good news to talk about, and look forward to sharing that with you.
Hello, everyone. Well, welcome back once again. I've got a very special interview with local North Dakota EV advocate Destiny Reeves Wolf, who I met through the podcast. She's doing some great work and has kind of put herself into this position to advocate for all of us here in North Dakota, and had a great conversation. So here it is. Well, thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. So we're recording now, in case you were wondering. So I wanted to kind of remind people how we sort of met each other through the podcast and picked up, because and you're a neonatal ICU nurse, is that right?
Right. So that's what I'm formally trained as. But living out here in Western North Dakota, we don't have that level of care for our patients. So here in Dickinson, I actually volunteer at our dinosaur museum. So I get to go and play with dinosaurs in the lab in the winter months and go out to the field and camp and dig out dinosaurs, new stuff in the summer. So it's really cool. And
that's just something do you have to have specific training to do that, or they kind of train you when you volunteer, or how does that work?
Yeah, so here in the museum, we're really lucky. We have some really talented paleontologists that are here in town. And so they've literally taught me everything that I need to know sort of as I go through. And they're there and they're accessible, and it's very supportive. So with my background in neonatology, I'm used to very detailed work, so it's not that far off in some world out there.
Yeah, and on small objects that require fine precision.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you for going to Bismarck, and that was the main thing. I just thought what you did was actually a great service to all of us that live in the Supercharger Dead Zone, to try to help, stop anything, or at least maybe try to make it better, to prevent them from kind of slowing down even further sort of the EV adoption and then the development of infrastructure here in North Dakota. So when did you go to Bismarck? Can you walk through kind of how that went? I know a lot of people on Facebook were very appreciative of what you did, and I thought it would be kind of nice to get into maybe a little bit more detail about how that went.
Sure, absolutely. So I thought it was important because, like you said, we're in the Supercharger Dead Zone. So for everybody to try and make it to Bismarck would be difficult, not just because of charging insufficiency across the state for people to physically get there, but time off of work and things like that. Yeah. So I was able to pop down. It's about an hour or so down the road for me to get to Bismarck. And really try to capture at least a snapshot of people, if they were willing to share with me their thoughts on where they stood on the legislation, what their proposed solutions were, and things like that. I'm a firm believer in coming to the table with a solution to a problem that you're sort of commenting on.
Right. So instead of just kind of complaining about the problem, maybe having a suggestion as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This, I think it's, we have to keep in mind that EV legislation and EVs in general in the state, where there's only, 140 or so of us, is really a new concept to a lot of people. And our legislators are included in that for sure.
Yeah.
So what I did was I literally grabbed that snapshot. So I met with people up in Grand Forks in person, since we were traveling up that way, chatted online with a number of folks from across the state. And it kind of culminated with dinner here at our home as well for those of us here on the western part of the state, where we just kind of, got together and finessed out some ideas and some solutions, and, tried to wrap our heads around where this figure of $248 was coming from.
Yeah. So just for those who may not know that are listening, so the legislation basically was proposed to impose essentially a replacement of the road usage tax that's incorporated into when you buy gasoline, right?
Right. So it's been proposed that the $248 is what the average North Dakota resident pays into the road use tax every year. And that's based on some average numbers of average miles per gallon per vehicle, and what have you, and publicly sourced information. So what we couldn't figure out, though, when we crunched the numbers ourselves, is how they actually got to the $248. And it was a little frustrating for us trying to put together something to bring to our legislators, because nobody was sort of being upfront with the number and how they arrived there. Nobody actually responded to any of our emails. And even one of our legislators that's here, his reply was sort of a blanket reply of, well, I know he did the numbers and he crunched the numbers and they add up. And we really couldn't get any more detail than that. Yeah. So when we crunched the numbers, what we got based on 2014 data, which was the most consistently publicly available data that we could find, is that the average North Dakota driver drives approximately 11,241 miles a year. The average miles per gallon per vehicle is about 24. And North Dakota's road use tax is about 23 cents per gallon. So for every gallon of gas that you pump, 23 cents of that comes back to the state for a road use tax. And so that's where that funding comes from. So based on all of those numbers, the average gas tax that's paid per vehicle here in North Dakota is about $107 a year, way off from the 243.
Yeah.
So, we're sitting here scratching our heads going, where did this come from? And so it was interesting. So the morning of there in Bismarck for the initial bill hearing. So the initial bill hearing happens before it's brought to the Senate floor. And it's basically a committee hearing. So sort of like a small boardroom where you have, half a dozen legislators sitting around a board table and a podium for anybody who wishes to speak with them about the proposed bill that they're discussing. And Senator Croyne was there.
And he's the one of, I guess, the main sponsor of the bill.
He's the sponsoring senator for this bill out of the Grand Forks area, which is in the northeastern part of the state.
Yeah, where I grew up, essentially.
Yep. And so it's interesting. So he broke down the numbers and actually had pretty similar numbers to us. So his fuel economy that he used was 25 miles per gallon. He said that the average vehicle travels about 15,000 miles per year.
Okay.
He included the state tax of 23 cents, but then he also included the federal excise tax of 18 cents. So he said, based on the 600 gallons per year, that's where he gets the $248 for.
Okay.
So that's how it broke down. And we really struggle with that because it's not really the state's responsibility to collect the federal funds and put it into the state budget themselves.
Yeah. So normally when we pump gas, the state would get their portion, and then does the federal portion then somehow separately get sent in, I guess, from the gas station people? I guess they would send it in when they pay their taxes. Is that how it works, I wonder?
Right. So the federal portion of the tax goes back to Washington, where then it's divvied up.
Okay.
And so North Dakota as a state is actually a state that receives more in road funding than we pay in when it comes to federal taxes. So the fact that, we should be potentially paying more still doesn't add up. Because if we start paying the extra federal tax to the state, that doesn't mean that the federal government is going to give us less. In a way, it sort of means that the state is double dipping.
That's a little concerning. Now, you sound like were you familiar with how this process worked, the legislative process before this, or is this something that you picked up, for this occasion?
Yeah, it's something that I sort of picked up for this occasion and sort of, delved into a little bit more because I am presenting, I feel, on behalf of all of us as EV owners on the state. So I really feel sort of an obligation to do a really good job and do a lot more research, because I know that, the legislators were going to come at me with some questions and comments and things like that. And that's totally fair game. So perhaps I did a little bit more research into facts and figures and things like that, because it's really not about how we feel about road tax. I think you've said it on a podcast as well. We really do need to pay in something, but what is that something, right? What's fair?
What's fair, exactly. Yeah, because, we need the roads maintained. I totally get that. And I don't know, does that road usage tax, I wonder, cover, like, the snow removal services too?
Right. So some of that road use tax would cover, say, interstate highway clearing and things like that. A lot of the secondary county roads would be covered by that specific county.
Okay.
And then, of course, in our urban centers, whether it's Dickinson out here where I am or Fargo where you are, all of that is municipalities. So that gets factored into our property taxes.
Okay. But some of that gap, what would we normally have paid in gas, would go to keeping the interstate area cleared out.
Absolutely, which I know I appreciate.
Yeah, that sort of has, and not every state has to deal with it to the extent that we do. But obviously it's got to get done. And the thing I struggled with here is, I sent a letter to Senator Croyan, an email, and I know a lot of folks out here in Fargo did the same thing. The part that I had trouble with was I guess I don't really know what's the answer. What alternate proposal could I come with? I just didn't want to see anything disincentivize progress, but I really couldn't come up with anything. When you were there with the people that you met, was there any sort of consensus about an alternate, methodology to get this funding? That's fair.
Yeah, so it was interesting to be able to really read some of the expressions on the senators' faces as I was sort of going through my breakdown of how we got to the numbers that we did and, potentially throwing around some solutions. And I think I really made them think about some things. So some of the things that we sort of came up with suggestions, and they were from a number of people from all over the state, was that we could do, a flat fee that would be closer in line to the $107 that the current ICE driver typically pays into the state fund. The second thing would be that we can pay more in registration fees based on the weight. So obviously my Model 3 weighs more than a similar sized, Toyota or something like that.
Yeah.
So obviously that would be, something that's very measurable, it's quantifiable, and could be adjusted. The other thing that we could do is that we could literally pay by the mile. So there's a number of states that are actually looking into this and have done some years-long studies on this, which is quite interesting. Oregon is one of them, and they're actually moving towards this for their long-term sort of revenue stream for roads, because they think that it's most sustainable. And so if you were to break it down to about 1 cent per mile, based on the, 15,000 miles, that the average North Dakota driver drives, it would bring it more in line with what a gas driver pays. It would be $150 is what that would equate to.
And then how do they implement that in Oregon? Do you just report you have to go in and they check your odometer? How do they...
Right. So they're literally just doing annual sort of odometer reportings, and whether that's done at a particular service center that people have to bring it in and have something jotted down, or whether the DOT is doing it themselves when they renew people's registrations. I think that that would certainly have to be looked into, but they're just yearly odometer readings, basically.
That's interesting. I wonder, if that were to happen, you think that Tesla would have the opportunity to have the operating system in the car generate this report and send it directly to them, or you could email it, just your annual mileage report to the state. And,
right. That's exactly it. I could walk into the DOT and bring up the Tesla app on my phone and show them real time what it is out in the parking lot, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so that would make it easier. I know when I used to live in Maryland, they did vehicle emissions testing routinely. And
Yep.
it was kind of a big pain in the neck. Essentially, you just had to go to one of these testing centers and sit there, and it's kind of like a little mini DMV experience where they would basically stick something in the tailpipe of your car and then measure the emissions and then charge you something if you pass, and then you get to go. But you had to do it every year. And so it was kind of this
And
nuisance,
Arizona
but-
was very much the same way. So, certainly some states have certainly, improvised or built the infrastructure to do that. And perhaps it's time that North Dakota really looks at something like that.
Yeah. I know one idea that we threw out before, also when I lived out east, there were just tolls everywhere. I mean, which is also a pain, but it does seem like it's inherently, there's some adjustment for who's actually using the interstate system. So if you're on it all the time, you're going to be paying tolls and you can use your Easy Pass or something like that. I just don't want the inconvenience of it, but it seems like that would be another easy way to collect it as it's being used. I just wouldn't want to have to deal with toll booths and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And again, I think North Dakota is one of those states that really is about government minimalization and things like that. So I think to try and convince them that we need, toll booths and to build things and build this infrastructure, I think would be a tough sell in this state.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, why we propose some more things that they may be more amenable to.
Yeah.
And, the fourth one that we threw at them, just to make them scratch their head, was we actually took the top 4 selling EVs. So that would be the 3 Tesla models, along with the Chevy Bolt.
Yeah.
And we calculated out their average estimated miles per gallon, which worked out to like 107 miles per gallon.
Yeah.
And actually said, based on the actual efficiency of our cars, we should owe you $24. But we know that's not likely going to happen. And I got a good couple chuckles for that. And I said, here's the thing. I said, when it comes to North Dakota, we actually do lack the infrastructure. And pointed out to our legislators that, I drove my Tesla from Dickinson the 100 miles east to Bismarck to be able to present today. And I said, we don't drive our vehicles the same way that you drive your gas engine. And case in point being, after this presentation that I give to you folks today, I'm actually going to go sit at a private business and charge for an hour or so to make sure that I have enough energy to make it back home.
Yeah.
And one of the senators actually, her jaw dropped.
Yeah.
I don't think they had really realized that this is a real issue. That no, we're not driving our cars like that. There's a Tesla owner in Minot that's never left Minot. So
yeah.
So it's a very real concern for sure.
Yeah, and that's the conversation when I first got the car, and how I'm always railing on the lack of superchargers. Where I am in Fargo, at least I can get to Clearwater. It can be a struggle, but I can get to Clearwater. Alexandria is coming probably sometime in the next 12 months. But I just can't go south. After Christmas, we wanted to visit my sister in Omaha, and to try to make it to Sioux Falls, where the next one is, going south, is just not a good idea right now, at least to me. I think you could do it. I mean, you might have to stop at a casino or find a NEMA 1450 somewhere, but you'd have to stay an hour to get like another 20, 25 miles, and then have to stop again and supercharge for 40 minutes, 50 minutes or so in Sioux Falls. And then I think from that point on, it would be just fine. But it's a tough sell going anywhere other than east still, even now. And
very much so. And for us here in Dickinson, it's interesting. We really can't go east-west along Interstate 94. We have to actually go south. So we can either hit Rapid City or we can hit Spearfish, that are both on I-90 that cut through South Dakota.
Yeah, South Dakota's covered pretty well. I mean, you can get, if I could get south down there, I could get to the Rushmore area and do all that kind of stuff. That part wouldn't be hard. It's just trying to get down to I-90 from Fargo. That's the trick.
Absolutely.
It'll get better, I'm sure. We just need to be patient, but it's tough. That's the one thing, as soon as I start telling people that, I sort of get the same sort of reactions too, that you can be driving along and then have to turn off your heat or something when it's cold, and they kind of look at you funny, like they had no idea the impact of the cold and how different it is when you're in an EV. I never have to go to the gas station. I think I've been once to fill up my Explorer. So to me, it's still well worth the trade-off. I'm not saying it, I wish I hadn't done it, but that as soon as they fix that and we get that infrastructure, great, which is why I thought it was so important that you went to talk to them. So when you were in Bismarck, did you find the government functional? Like, did you find that people were really receptive and still open on this issue, or did you find that this was kind of a done deal, or did you feel like that you had wasted your time when you went down there?
No, that's an interesting question. So North Dakota apparently has one of the most open state legislators in the country in terms of public accessibility. So the ability for residents here of North Dakota to go in and speak to issues or get a hold of their legislators and things like that. And based on my experience in Bismarck, I would actually have to strongly agree with that sentiment. Mm-hmm. So everybody there was very helpful in being able to direct me where I needed to go and giving me the information and what have you. And so I actually joined the committee a little bit early, since I was there early, obviously traveling, 100 miles from out of town. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of sat in on some of their committee business. They didn't seem to mind. Mm-hmm. And then right before the bill was initially discussed or up for discussion, the room suddenly became packed. So I was the only one sitting there and, probably about 20 empty chairs. And then suddenly it was like standing room only, which was very interesting. And you have a little clipboard with a sheet on it, and you have to sign yourself in as to who you are, what bill you're there to discuss, and whether you're for, against, or neutral on the bill.
Okay.
And so it was interesting looking at the tally of who was there for it versus against and what have you. So there were about 3 people that were against it, mm-hmm. and probably about 8 or so that considered themselves neutral. And I put myself as against just because I was against the way that it was written as is. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I classified myself on it.
Right.
And there were probably about 3 or 4 of us that were strongly against.
Okay.
And so they let the opposition, or they let the people in support of the bill mm-hmm. Speak first. So 3 people spoke first. One was a general contractor. The second one was a lobbyist for a group that represents a number of smaller cities in the state. And a third was just a citizen that was for it. And then they have anybody who's against the bill, they give them an option to speak then. And so I was first to speak, and it was interesting to watch, like I said, some of the senators' facial reactions as I went through.
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of eyes open that, we do want to pay something, but perhaps not this.
Yeah.
And, let's break it down. Let's go back to the drawing board and really figure this out because, and I did actually give recognition to Senator Croyne mm-hmm. for bringing forward this really forward-thinking legislation.
Right. Since there's only 140 EVs in the state, he is ahead of the curve. And I wondered if he thought it would just be easier when it impacts fewer people to try to get it introduced rather than wait when there's 10,000 or 20,000 in the state.
Right. I think you may be on to something there. And so I actually did commend him, and he was sitting, behind me as I presented. So mm-hmm. So I did turn around and give him, respect where respect is due for sure. Uh-huh. And, let's fix this funding gap while we can. But let's take our time and get this right the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine just like any other big organization, like once you make a change, it can be really hard to eliminate something or to make a change to it once it's already sort of the established precedent. So
right. And I really hope that was my take home. But I really think that going in saying that we want to pay something, mm-hmm. I think then they really listened and paid a little bit more attention, that I wasn't just opposed to it, but I really wanted to come in there and problem solve with them and offer up, like I said, some solutions. So mm-hmm. really, by the end of it, it was interesting. There's a rule in these committees just for sake of time allotment, I believe, that you cannot repeat something that has already been said in somebody else's testimony to the committee. So it was interesting. I was glad that I was able to go first. I sort of knocked out all of my ideas.
That would be good.
Yeah. And, after I had said everything, there was only one other gal who got up and spoke a statement that her father had written. He's up in the Pembina region of the state, which is right at the Canadian border, sort of in between Grand Forks and Winnipeg up in Canada. Yeah. And so, she spoke more to the hybrid fees and sort of broke that down for them. So, but yeah, after I'd said everything, there was nothing else left to say, and so nobody else spoke. So that was
I mean, it sure sounds like, and I can tell you did your homework. I mean, you were well prepared. You were able to make time, which is great to do this. And then also you met with a lot of people and got feedback in person. I imagine you got some really helpful feedback as well on Facebook through the North Dakota Tesla group, probably the Minnesota Tesla group a little bit too.
Absolutely. And, and there were some people sending me some private messages as well. So I really feel, the mass majority of us, there were a couple, people that stuck out that were like, no, we shouldn't pay anything at all. And it's like, I don't know about that.
If we want the transition to be, majority EV, somehow the roads have to be managed. That just kind of seems like a common sense there. We got to pay something. It just, as long as it's proportionate and fair, I got no problem with it. Because we've been paying it all along anyway, and I guess I never really gave it a second thought. I would just get gas and that's it. I'd spend my $45 a tank twice a month or so and just never really thought about it.
Right, and that's exactly it. And I think the fact that it comes as a potential $100 or $200 or $300 financial hit all at once, I think people are paying a little bit more attention. But it really has been something that we all sort of pay, over the years. Yeah. And we don't think twice about it. It's just included. That's just the price of gas.
Yeah. The only time I started thinking about it was when I knew I was getting the Tesla, and I was trying to figure out how much over the course of a year I would save that I would have normally paid on gas, to sort of help convince myself that I could afford it. It's not as expensive as it looks, and just kind of factor that in too, that, I'm not going to be spending this regular outlay every month. So that was the first time I really even started considering it, but I didn't factor in the taxes in the gas. I just kind of looked at the overall monthly, amount that I was spending. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I think regardless of, what we're saving, even if we actually do pay this amount into the road use fee, we're all still really coming out ahead as electric vehicle owners. It's still much more affordable in the long run to drive an electric vehicle, in terms of less maintenance, in terms of less things to go wrong, in terms of just overall charging is much more affordable than a tank of gas, regardless of this extra fee. So I think it'll hit people a little bit, like I said, with it being one big in-your-face charge. But I don't think it will, maybe I'm being the optimist here, but I don't think it will slow down EV growth as much as some people are a little bit fearful of. And I think the other side to that is because it's not only going to be consumer driven, but it's also going to be manufacturer driven. So if we're looking at car trends that are up and coming, Volvo, for instance, by the end of this year, is what they've said, they will only be manufacturing either hybrids or all electrics.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see more. I actually saw a Jaguar I-Pace parked at the hospital here in Fargo in the sort of the public charging area. So Sanford has 4 basically free level 2 chargers available. So, and people just kind of come and use it. It's on it's on PlugShare as a place that you can use, and so we see them all the time. There's actually 2 Model 3s now where I work, and then a bunch of S's and X's that have been there for a while. So I'm definitely, it used to be it would take, every few days I would see a Tesla. But now it's just about every day where I might see one, or for sure I'll see one, and I might see more than that in any given day. So I can tell it's starting to pick up. I know some people that have reservations or that are kind of thinking about it. So I think I agree with you. I don't know that this EV tax, even if it went through, I don't know how much of a difference it would make. It might be something that people find out after they made the purchase about it, and it really didn't factor into their decision.
You could potentially be right on that one.
Yeah.
And we've seen the same growth here in Dickinson. You look at Dickinson, we're a town of 25,000 people. And currently right now in town, there's 3 Model 3s running around. There's 2 S's, and somebody else here has an X on order. So
yeah, that's a lot.
You look at that, and that's just phenomenal. I think to be able to be forward thinking enough to be like, you know what, I'm committed to this even without superchargers. So kudos to everyone. I know I'm giving myself kudos on this one,
course.
but kudos to everybody for having faith in the bigger picture of things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think the very early Tesla adopters in California and wherever else where it's warm, they had a similar challenge, just to try to deal with an underdeveloped infrastructure. And now Tesla's a very mature, I don't know if very, but they're a much more mature company. The supercharger network covers just about everybody. We just happen to be in this last pocket. So we are still sort of dealing with some of that issue that the first adopters had where, the car is great and we're still kind of waiting for the infrastructure to catch up. And, that of course will end at some point, but
Right. And I think it will end sooner rather than later. I really am hopeful for this summer. I know Dickinson's permit is pulled and approved for our superchargers and has been for a while. So
yeah, I think
I remain the optimist.
Yeah, that's good. I think on that one I struggle. That's an area where it's hard for me because I've looked at the Tesla forums on this, and you see people talking about they said that last year, they said that the year before that, they said that the year after that, but it's coming. I think the last time I looked on supercharge.info, the permit in Alexandria is pulled, but that looks like it is for sure like legit going to happen this year. They think the location's going to be at like near the Target store in Alexandria, so I think that one's pretty firm. The one in Fargo that's permitted, you guys, and then also Pembina, I just don't see any movement there, but they've been permitted. I think it was like 200 and some days since the permit was pulled.
Absolutely. Yeah. Probably even potentially more than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's a firm thing. They're coming.
It's just a matter of when. Yeah. And it would be really nice. But, I totally get it from Tesla's perspective that, if they're looking at where they really need to put resources, now they probably have Model 3s, driving over each other to try to get into a supercharger stall in California. They've got lots of them, but they just have more cars than they had built up for. So to impact more people, it makes sense to go there. So I get it why we're the last ones. I don't have, I can't really debate that point.
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. And I think Tesla's business model, when it comes to that, is just stellar. Look at somebody like Elon Musk, who really has headed the company probably during its most trying times, in times where they're literally hemorrhaging money and don't know if they're going to be able to pay their employees or keep the lights on and things like that. And they're just so committed to the EV cause that they just kept barreling through and hoping for the best outcome.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to have not invested all of that capital in a place like North Dakota. As much as I love North Dakota, it makes sense to not put that money here, where you really do have a bit of a limited market in terms of a lot of our folks are involved in ag and things like that. And so an electric vehicle at this time, or, back then a few years ago, certainly wouldn't meet a lot of people's needs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'm glad that it's catching up now. I think Tesla can sort of take a deep breath with Model 3 and its proven successes over the last couple quarters, and finally put in some capital into some of these places like here in North Dakota.
Yeah. Do you? I kind of get the sense. I wonder if you agree that it seems like Tesla has gotten over the hump now, and like whatever issues they have are just going to be like the normal things that car companies deal with. I really feel like they have made it. They successfully navigated this difficult startup period, and Model 3, like you said, it's the product is fantastic. So they delivered where it really matters, and I think after this, I think it's going to be much easier. I hope the Model Y rollout, that they are able to sort of incorporate how this went. But even if they're a little bit behind, I think they've already proven that despite all of that stuff, they're going to deliver something that people want that gets us closer to where we need to get.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. We've already said, I want to say within the first 2 weeks of us having the 3 here at home, that we will never buy another gasoline vehicle again.
Yep.
We, don't do any off-roading. We don't do any ag work or anything like that. And so 2 EVs would certainly fit our household needs very well. And, I think people are okay with waiting for a Tesla. So
yeah.
I think Tesla for sure has learned how to mass produce a car on a level, on a level 3 level anyway, or a Model 3 level anyway. And so, I think they're going to take some of those lessons to heart. And I think Model Y production will be much smoother.
Yeah.
Elon himself has been the first to say, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this.
Yeah.
And you think about I joke that Tesla is, being a Tesla owner is probably the best cult that you can belong to.
That's a good way to
because
put it.
we find each other, we wave at each other. It's a camaraderie like no other. I mean, who else is going to understand? I wear 3 pairs of socks so I can save, 30 kilowatt hours on my drive.
Yeah.
It really is to some degree its own sort of subculture.
Yeah, the other day,
as evidenced by you having a podcast simply about Teslas in North Dakota.
Yeah, when you think about it, what other companies, what other products do you buy where people really have that much intense sort of passion and interest in it, where they'll do that? Well, they'll sit in their car and listen, or they'll decide to spend time making a podcast. I mean, I remember when Apple and Steve Jobs' time was similar. So that happened, but that when you were talking about the waving at people and other Teslas, that remind me, the other day we were pulling out and we pulled up next to a Tesla 3. I actually was an S on the highway that I hadn't seen before, and my kids get super excited when they see another Tesla. And as we were driving by, we were kind of giving them like the Tesla wave. And I remembered I wasn't in my Tesla. We had already done the wave, but I was in my other car because the Tesla doesn't seat more than 5 people. So we were all excited. And I think they thought we were just a little bit crazy.
Excited about a Tesla, right. Which, and I've had people in ICE cars, on my drive back through South Dakota after we, finally met on delivery day for us. And, I was driving back through South Dakota, and I had a number of people actually in ICE vehicles just really excited just to see it.
Yes.
And so, I mean, you look at Tesla as a whole, and I'm really excited about the Model Y. I don't know that they're over the final hump yet. If you look at the capital investment that it still takes to bring a car to delivery, from concept design to delivery, so I don't know that they're over the final hump yet. Yeah. But I think they're over the biggest ones. Yeah. And so I think with the following, with the supporters of a more mass market that the Model 3 has certainly brought in. Yeah. My husband and I, we were followers of Tesla for years. He would probably admit me more than him. I'm certainly the car person in the family. But we've been following Tesla for years. And so the Model 3 just came out at the right time when we were replacing a vehicle and said, you know what, let's go all in. Yeah. Let's really make this investment. Let's do the right thing. Yeah. So
are you going to put a deposit on a
Model? They'll be okay.
Are you going to put a deposit on a Model Y as soon as they release it for deposits?
Potentially, yes, depending on when they're saying that release date is. Yeah. But, it's interesting because looking at some of the configuration changes that they've made in the Model 3, for instance, and they actually changed some of the seats in the Model 3 because the Model S was first really uncomfortable, apparently. And so, Tesla's that company that will take a response. And because we don't have so-called model years or set model years of a vehicle, they can implement a change sort of next week. And they do that on the fly. Yeah. So I may actually wait a couple months after they're out to put a deposit on a Y, but I certainly foresee us being a 2 EV family for sure.
Yeah, I think what I'm planning to do is if they do it the same way they did before, where it's refundable, fully refundable if you change your mind, I think I'm going to do it just to hold my spot in line and then see, because I would imagine, because I think Elon had posted on Twitter that the product announcement is supposed to be middle of March. I think he said March 15th.
Right.
So I speculate that that's when they'll let you make deposits as well. But so that's kind of in my head. That's how I see it going down. But, it'll depend. But I still think whenever that happens to be, I probably will go ahead. If it's $1,000, I'll probably try to get my spot in line held and see how it goes from there.
Yeah, so now your wife will have no choice but to drive a Tesla.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. Thanks for taking the time with me. We're pushing on an hour here. I didn't mean to take that much of your time, but
that's all right. Hopefully, people listen to the end.
Yeah. So whoever is still listening, so what's the next step? What would you recommend that people do to sort of help you, or to, should they email? What should they do next?
Yeah, so you can certainly look on the North Dakota State Legislator site. You can see who is on the Transportation Committee. That's where the bill is currently sitting. So it's interesting because the bill is actually open for another day of presentations, which is tomorrow morning. So I'm actually going to drive back out to Bismarck tomorrow morning.
Wow.
And the reason why they left it open is because there's apparently a lobbyist that is against this bill entirely, who's flying out from Washington, D.C., and nobody seems to know who this is. So I'm going to figure it out, the big puzzle. And so it was interesting because I actually met with our area senator here, and even though the bill is with committee, I let him know, along with Brian, who's another Tesla owner here in town. We met with him on Saturday morning for coffee. And I said, I know you're not on the committee. I know this is where the bill is sitting, but I also know that you talk to people on the committee. And what you need to know is that we, as your actual constituents, are saying we want to pay something. So, depending on what this person comes in from, saying from DC makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not a fan of lobbyists at this level. It just certainly makes me a little bit uneasy. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to head back out to Bismarck to hear that. So hopefully we can have an update on that, later on this week. And but yeah, you can certainly search who's sitting on that committee. Certainly email them if you support what I say, if you want to back up what I'm saying, if you want to say something different. Everybody certainly has the right to voice their opinions. That's what makes this country great. Mm-hmm. And, that's just the best way, is that, they're going to get feedback from us as EV owners, because it's just a totally new language for them to try and work around.
Yeah. And again, can't thank you enough on behalf of our Tesla community here in Fargo. I just can't thank you enough for doing what you're doing. I mean, it really is taking a lot of your time, and at least from what you've done so far, it's amazing, and you're still working on it. So I think it's really going to make a difference.
Absolutely. That's my intent. And, I didn't mean to become, political advocate, 3 months into Tesla ownership, but here we are. So you do what's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing too is I was very pleased this morning. I don't know if you saw my post this morning on the North Dakota page. No. This morning at the crack of dawn, it was our one day to sleep in. My husband didn't have a patient until 9:30 or something in the morning, and so 7:30 my phone rings, and it's a Bismarck number, and I'm like, it's probably spam, didn't answer. And the phone rings back again, probably about 45 minutes later. And here it's one of the state lawyers in Bismarck. And, it's so North Dakota, right? So we actually ran into Mike LaFour.
Yeah.
Who's the brother of our friend there in Fargo.
Yeah, Todd. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Todd's brother, and because they're originally all from the Dickinson area. And so we run into him at like one of our Friday night haunts. We go for bar trivia on Friday nights. And so Mike is there and, comes up to us and he's chatting with, Craig and I, and we just kind of put the bug in his ear about this legislation that's coming forward and the EV use tax. And we said, something we actually do need, though, is parking enforcement for charging stations.
Oh, I did see that. Yes, now I remember.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
And so I kind of put the bug in his ear. I didn't really hear anything back. And I had sent him like a follow-up email because he goes, oh, send me a follow-up email. Like my wife's over there and she's ready to drop papers, right? Like I've been talking to too many people tonight.
Yeah.
And so we sent him a link to some of the incidents that have happened recently. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we're like, this is a time to get ahead of this in North Dakota. Like, it'd be really good PR that the state that doesn't have superchargers has already preemptively
Now that's getting ahead of the game. That's really forward thinking.
Well, and especially because they only meet every other year, right? They're bienniums here.
Yeah.
So we're like, maybe we want to do this. And so sure as anything, this gentleman calls me from Bismarck this morning, just needing a couple clarifying things. And I explained the background of the reasoning for us wanting this in place. And he was really intrigued, and he sounded like he knew some of the terms for EV and things like that. So that's good that he seems to know some of the technical terms. And, when I steered him towards some of the other states that do have pretty solid legislation from what we can read. So California's is specifically like you can't park there, impede, block access to, like it's very black and white clear.
Yeah.
And like, you better behave yourself and be charging at this spot.
Yeah.
And so I know he went to go and look up some of that legislation to get some clarification. So hopefully that should be coming through the House side of things.
That's awesome. That is really great.
Yeah. So I'm just really glad that people are listening and wanting to move in the right direction.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. You can reach out to the show on email at teslanewstopics@gmail.com, on Twitter at Tesla News Topics. Music for the show provided by Melodious Thunk. I have a referral code if you want to use it, ts.la/Jeff62003. We are also on Patreon if you feel like supporting the show in any way, patreon.com/Tesla News Topics. And of course, thanks again to Destiny for agreeing to speak with me for the show. That's it for this episode. Have a great week. See you next time.